Tycoon humiliates ex-wife by showing Mistress at event. She arrives later with a billionaire husband. The grand chandelier sparkled like a constellation, casting a warm golden glow over the ballroom. Every inch of the room whispered wealth and power. Marble floors polished to perfection, tables adorned with crystal glasses that caught the light like diamonds, and velvet drapes that framed the scene like a painting. The soft hum of a string quartet mingled with the chatter of the elite, their laughter crisp and rehearsed, a soundtrack to a world far removed from ordinary life. This was not just an event. It was a stage for power, pride, and social dominance. At the center of it all stood Alexander Beaumont, the tycoon whose name carried weight in every corner of the city. He was dressed immaculately in a tailored tuxedo, his posture rigid, as if sculpted from marble. Every detail, from his slicked-back hair to the polished shine of his shoes, screamed control and perfection. But beneath that facade of calm elegance was a storm, a cold and calculated determination. Tonight was not merely a gathering. It was his arena, and he intended to demonstrate his victory over a past wound he had never truly forgiven: his ex-wife. By his side was Isabella, the mistress he paraded with the pride of conquest. Her gown shimmered with the same brilliance as the chandelier above, her laughter like the delicate chime of crystal, echoing through the room. Alexander's eyes followed every whisper, every glance, as he leaned in close to Isabella, murmuring with a calculated charm, "You see that woman over there? My past, crumpled and forgotten. Tonight, she witnesses the truth. I am the one who moves forward, unshaken." Isabella smiled, her eyes gleaming with both excitement and malice. "And she will see it, Alexander. She will see you with me, and the world at your feet. Oh, the look on her face will be priceless." Alexander's lips curved into a faint, satisfied smile. Precisely. Sometimes the greatest power is in showing someone exactly what they lost, and proving they can never take it back. Meanwhile, across the room, Anna, a woman whose elegance was understated, yet impossible to ignore, stepped into the ballroom. Her presence was different. There was no overt display of wealth or fashion extravagance, but there was something magnetic about her. Her posture, straight and poised, spoke of quiet strength forged in fire. Her eyes scanned the room, not with fear or hesitation, but with a careful awareness of every face, every whisper. Tonight, she was an observer, yet the room seemed to shift subtly with her presence, as if the air itself acknowledged her story. As she approached the entrance, she caught sight of Alexander and Isabella together, a display of audacious triumph. A sharp pang of pain struck her chest, a mix of anger, betrayal, and humiliation. She could feel it in every breath, every heartbeat. But she steadied herself, drawing a deep breath, her mind refusing to bow to the sting of the past. "I will not crumble," she whispered softly, almost to herself. "I will not give him that satisfaction." The murmurs of the crowd reached her ears, fragments of sentences floating like knives. "Isn't that Alexander's ex-wife? I heard she was devastated when he left her for that girl." Anna's cheeks flushed, but she kept her composure, letting a serene smile mask the turmoil inside. Her hands trembled slightly, betraying the emotional storm, but she maintained a graceful stride toward the center of the room. Alexander noticed her entrance, a flicker of recognition sparking in his eyes. He straightened imperceptibly, a subtle tightening of his jaw as if sensing that the evening's theatrics might be about to take a turn. Isabella's laughter faltered, a whisper of unease slipping through her confident exterior. "Who is she?" she asked, her voice laced with curiosity and a hint of nervousness. "She's history," Alexander replied, almost coldly. "But tonight, she is nothing more than a reminder of what I conquered." Anna's gaze found him, steady and unyielding. There was no pleading, no tears, just a quiet intensity that spoke louder than any words. "Conquered?" she thought bitterly. "You think this is victory, Alexander? This room, this crowd, they may applaud your wealth, your power, but they do not see what truly matters. They cannot see what you destroyed in the name of pride." The distance between them seemed to shrink as she moved forward, each step deliberate, measured. The music of the quartet swelled as if to underscore the tension, each note vibrating with the unspoken emotions hanging in the air. Guests turned, sensing an invisible confrontation, a storm beneath the surface of polite conversation. Alexander raised a glass, a smug, calculated gesture meant to draw attention. "To new beginnings," he said loudly, his voice echoing through the marble hall. His eyes flicked toward Anna, daring her to react, to falter. "And to those who fail to rise again." Anna's lips curved into a small, knowing smile, almost imperceptible. She met his gaze and replied softly, yet with unwavering clarity. "Some of us rise not to overshadow, but to remember who we truly are. And tonight, I am not just rising, I am arriving." A hush fell over the immediate area, the subtle shift in energy almost tangible. The first act had begun. The stage set, the players in motion, and the audience unaware that the story they were witnessing was only the opening chapter of a drama that would leave no heart untouched. Alexander felt a twinge, the first crack in his meticulously constructed armor. Isabella, sensing it too, tightened her grip on his arm, leaning in with a whispered assurance. "You still hold the power. You control the narrative." But Anna, walking with a steady grace, had already decided power, true power, was not about display or humiliation. It was about survival, dignity, and the quiet strength to reclaim one's life in a world that tried to define her by loss. And tonight, she had arrived to prove exactly that. This completes the first topic, setting the stage for intense emotions, power dynamics, and dramatic tension. The audience can feel Alexander's pride, Isabella's smugness, and Anna's quiet, simmering strength. If you want, I can continue with topic 2, where we dive into Anna's character development and her initial emotional reactions as she navigates the room, keeping the same level of narrative depth, dialogue, and emotional intensity. Do you want me to continue with topic 2? Vos dis. Certo, agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a historia sem marcacos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Me conti sobre o tópico tu com dialogo como su faço espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita emoco. Com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters o chat GPT diz. Absolutely. Let's continue with topic 2, focusing on Anna's entrance and character development, exploring her emotions in depth and including dialogue. I'll maintain a linear narrative, rich in feeling, as if you are witnessing it unfold firsthand. Anna paused at the entrance for a heartbeat, letting the brilliance of the chandelier wash over her. The opulence of the ballroom was dazzling, almost blinding in its intensity. Golden reflections on the polished floor, crystal glasses that caught the light like fragments of a dream, and silk dresses swirling with whispered conversations. But despite the luxury surrounding her, a knot of tension tightened in her chest. Each step forward felt like walking through a storm of memories she had tried to bury. She remembered the nights alone in her apartment after Alexander left her for Isabella, the echo of laughter that wasn't hers, the promises that had turned into shards of regret. Her heart throbbed, but she refused to let it betray her outward calm. She straightened her spine, letting the subtle sway of her dress glide with her movement, and breathed in the scent of polished roses and expensive perfume. She had to appear composed. The world expected nothing less, but inside, a tumult of emotions churned. Anger, hurt, longing, and an ember of defiance that refused to die. A group of guests noticed her and murmured among themselves. One whispered, almost sneeringly, "Isn't that Alexander's ex-wife?" Anna caught the words without looking, the edges of her lips tightening into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Yes," she thought quietly, "I am that woman, but I am not the same one you remember." Alexander, across the room, felt the shift the moment her gaze met his. He straightened, a faint tightening at the corner of his jaw, like a horse sensing a storm on the horizon. Isabella noticed, too. "Who is that?" she asked, tilting her head, eyes narrowing. "She's history," Alexander replied, his voice low and deliberate, though a flicker of unease betrayed him. "She belongs to the past. Remember that." Anna, moving forward, sensed his gaze lingering. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain poised. Each step was measured, deliberate, a silent declaration that she had survived, and she would not be diminished tonight. She felt the weight of the whispers, the subtle judgment of strangers who had no idea of her pain but assumed it was written all over her. A young woman, standing nearby, whispered to her companion, "She looks different, stronger somehow." Anna heard it and felt a small surge of something unfamiliar. Pride. "Stronger," she repeated in her mind. "I am stronger." She let the words settle like armor around her heart, a protective shell against the vulnerability that threatened to surface. A man approached her, a distant cousin of a guest, perhaps, with a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good evening, Mrs.?" He hesitated, searching for the right surname. "Anna Whitmore," she said softly, her voice even, with a quiet confidence that surprised even her. "Thank you." As he nodded and moved away, Anna's thoughts drifted briefly to Alexander. She could feel his prideful gaze burning into her back like fire. A flash of anger rose, not of desire, but of remembrance, of every cruel word, every cold dismissal. But she swallowed it, turning it instead into a sharpened resolve. Tonight she would not react. Tonight she would observe, she would endure, and she would rise. She moved deeper into the room, scanning the crowd with a practiced calm. Conversations fluttered around her like moths to flame. Discussions of acquisitions, art collections, exotic vacations. Yet all of it felt hollow, a veneer over emptiness. She had once chased this world, tried to measure herself against it, only to be cast aside. But now, standing in the center of it, she realized that she did not need its validation. Her worth was not in their eyes, but in her own. Alexander, watching her, felt a stir of something he had not anticipated: doubt. He had spent years building a life that seemed untouchable, showcasing his power, flaunting his triumphs. But seeing her here, composed, undeniably elegant, and unbroken, unsettled him. She's still herself, he murmured almost to himself, but stronger. I didn't anticipate this. Isabella, sensing the shift in his demeanor, clutched his arm, voice a whisper of concern, tinged with irritation. "She looks radiant. How is she so calm?" Alexander shook his head, a bitter smile curving his lips. "She's not calm. She's calculated, and she's dangerous in her restraint. Watch her carefully." Anna felt their scrutiny but refused to let it touch her. She reminded herself of the nights she had cried in silence, the mornings she had woken with the weight of abandonment pressing down. She had clawed herself out of that pit, piece by piece, until she stood here now. Not a victim, not a shadow, but a woman of substance, tempered by fire. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne, and she accepted a glass, her fingers brushing the crystal lightly. She raised it in a polite nod to a passing acquaintance, her eyes briefly scanning Alexander again. In that glance, there was no pleading, no accusation, only a quiet declaration. "I am here, I exist, and I am unbroken." The orchestra shifted to a soft waltz, the music curling around the marble columns and rich fabrics. Anna found a vantage point near the edge of the ballroom, where she could see everything: the laughter, the whispers, the unspoken rivalries. All of it a stage upon which a very personal drama would unfold. She thought of the life she had built since Alexander left, the independence she had fought for, the achievements that no one had seen, and the strength she had cultivated in solitude. She realized that tonight was not about revenge. It was about presence. She did not need to humiliate him to prove her triumph. Her existence, calm and radiant, was a statement more powerful than any words could convey. Alexander shifted, sensing the undercurrent, and muttered to himself, a rare tremor in his tone. She's nothing like I imagined. She's formidable. Anna, almost sensing the words without hearing them, let a small smile curl on her lips. It was not a smile of victory, at least not yet, but a smile of quiet resolve, of unshakable dignity. The night was far from over, and she knew that the storm Alexander had prepared for her would not find her broken. Instead, she would meet it, unflinching, with a heart that had endured betrayal and emerged, not hardened, but beautifully unbroken. And in that moment, as the lights glimmered and the guests whispered, Anna Whitmore became more than Alexander's ex-wife. She became a presence impossible to ignore, a force of quiet power and measured grace, standing at the threshold of a night that would change everything. For him, for her, and for the story that was about to unfold. This completes topic 2, focusing entirely on Anna's character, her emotions, inner strength, and the tension between her and Alexander, with layered dialogue and narrative intensity. He nodded almost imperceptibly, the ghost of a smirk curling on his lips. Yes, she must see it. Everyone must see it. I will remind her that she lost. Across the room, Anna moved with deliberate calm, her eyes scanning the crowd, but she felt the weight of his stare like a tangible force pressing against her spine. Every instinct screamed at her, warning that tonight would be a battlefield of pride, power, and emotion. Yet she walked forward, each step a quiet rebellion against the humiliation Alexander had crafted with such care. As the string quartet shifted into a richer, more resonant chord, Alexander raised his glass again, this time louder, more deliberately, addressing a cluster of influential guests with a practiced charm. "To new beginnings," he proclaimed, his gaze flicking toward Anna like a predator measuring its prey. "And to those who remind us why the past should remain there behind us." A few polite claps followed, but a tense hush settled over the immediate circle. Anna's lips pressed into a thin line, her jaw tightening, but her eyes remained calm, steady. She felt the familiar sting of humiliation, the sharp memory of years spent wondering if she would ever matter again in the world that had so easily discarded her. Yet beneath the sting was a spark, a defiance that had grown stronger in the silence of her recovery. A guest whispered beside her, leaning slightly forward, "I can't believe he would show her like this, in front of everyone." Anna's mind flickered with a shadow of the past. The nights Alexander had left without a word, the conversations he had ended with cold precision, the casual cruelty that had always masked his arrogance. She felt a familiar ache rise in her chest, but she swallowed it, channeling every ounce of that pain into poise. "Some people never learn," she whispered under her breath, almost a mantra to herself. "But I am not here to teach him." Isabella, noticing Anna's composure, tilted her head, her voice dripping with derision. "She's still standing. How is that possible? I expected tears, desperation." Alexander's smile hardened. "She's a ghost of the past," he said, voice low, almost menacing. "But ghosts can be dangerous if they linger too long. Watch her, Isabella. Watch her closely." Anna, hearing their words, allowed herself a brief flicker of amusement. Just a spark, but she quickly extinguished it, replacing it with measured elegance. Her movements were precise, her gaze unwavering. She knew the spectacle he sought to create, the humiliation he relished, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of a visible reaction. Every twitch, every flinch he anticipated would be denied. The orchestra shifted again, the music swelling, carrying a subtle tension that rippled through the room. Alexander took the opportunity to glide toward Anna, positioning himself in the center of the room with Isabella at his side, a deliberate display of possession and triumph. His steps were slow, almost ceremonious, each movement calculated to catch attention. "Alexander," Anna said softly, voice steady but edged with something he had never heard before, strength wrapped in a quiet fire, "you've certainly mastered the art of spectacle." He froze for a fraction of a heartbeat, surprised by the clarity in her tone, but quickly recovered, masking his falter with a practiced charm. "Anna," he said, voice smooth, almost silk. You should be honored. Not everyone gets a front row seat to such triumph. She let a subtle, almost imperceptible smile touch her lips. I'm honored by many things, she replied lightly. But seeing someone cling to past victories, that's hardly one of them. The tension thickened, palpable, like a storm about to break. Guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the clash of histories and power, the silent electricity weaving between them. Alexander's pride bristled, a mixture of anger and disbelief forming behind his eyes. He had anticipated shock, tears, maybe even a faint tremor of envy, but Anna's composure defied every expectation. Isabella, growing uneasy, murmured, She's not reacting. How can she be so calm? Alexander's jaw tightened, a shadow of frustration crossing his face. Calm? She's calculating. She knows exactly what she's doing. That's worse than tears. That's defiance. Anna felt his gaze like a blade, each glance pressing against her confidence, but she held it. Every beat of her heart screamed with memories of rejection, betrayal, and solitude. Yet she transformed that pain into fuel. She realized, in a moment of sharp clarity, that the humiliation he intended for her would not come. Not here, not tonight. She would not bow. She would not falter. A waiter passed by with champagne, and she took a delicate sip, letting the glass rest lightly in her hand. She raised it in a polite, almost teasing nod toward Alexander, and in that small gesture, she communicated more than words ever could. I am here. I am unbroken. You do not control me. Alexander's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. For the first time, he noticed that the audience's eyes were subtly shifting. Many no longer focused on him or Isabella, but on Anna, the calm, poised woman standing firmly in the storm of their spectacle. A sudden tightening in his chest, almost unfamiliar, made him whisper under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. She's stronger than I imagined, and she's not afraid of me. Anna, sensing the subtle falter, allowed herself a fraction of a smile, not triumphant, but knowing. She had walked into a room designed to humiliate her, to diminish her, and instead, she had become the quiet center of gravity. The audience, though unaware of the full history, could feel it, the shift, the tension, the silent power she now wielded by simply being herself. The moment stretched, elongated by the unspoken battles, until the orchestra's strings wove a haunting melody that seemed to echo the pulse of their emotions. Alexander raised his glass again, but this time it felt hollow, lacking the intended sting. Isabella, sensing the change, gripped his arm tightly, whispering in frustration, "What's happening? Why isn't she?" He shook his head, voice low, almost bitter. "She's not responding the way she should. This was supposed to break her, but she's rising instead." And in that electric, suspended moment, the first act of the evening, the public spectacle of humiliation, had already begun to turn against him. The chessboard had shifted. The pieces he thought he controlled were moving on their own, guided by a quiet, indomitable force. Anna's heart beat steadily, every cell alive with emotion, pain, and defiance. She realized something powerful. Victory was not measured by his embarrassment, nor by public approval, but by the unshakable knowledge that she could stand firm, even in the face of orchestrated cruelty. And as the crowd whispered, half in curiosity, half in admiration, Anna Whitmore, the woman he had thought powerless, was already claiming her first silent triumph. This completes Topic 3, heightening the suspense and the first instance of the public power struggle. The story keeps the audience on edge, feeling Alexander's frustration, Isabella's fear, and Anna's quiet strength, curling through the air, subtle shifts in attention. She realized, almost with a thrill, that the night was no longer his spectacle alone. A young socialite approached her, offering a polite bow and a thinly veiled curiosity. "Anna, I didn't expect to see you here," she said, voice light, yet tinged with the recognition of scandal. "It's brave in a way." Anna smiled gently, letting the warmth be genuine, yet measured. "I've learned that courage isn't always loud," she said, her voice calm, yet carrying a subtle power. "Sometimes it's simply showing up where they expect you to falter." The girl's eyes widened slightly. "Yes, I can see that. You're different. Stronger somehow." A flicker of satisfaction touched Anna's chest. "Stronger is a word hard one," she replied quietly, and then softer, almost to herself. "But tonight, it must speak louder than any words." Meanwhile, Alexander watched her from across the room, the shift in the air gnawing at him. He had anticipated shock, maybe an awkward glance, even a blush of embarrassment. But none of it came. She moved among the crowd with quiet composure, greeting acquaintances with grace, her head held high, her confidence radiating. Isabella leaned closer, voice a whisper edged with irritation. "She's too calm. This isn't what I expected." "What is she doing?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "She's watching, calculating, and she's more dangerous than I thought. Every word, every glance. It's all deliberate." Anna felt his gaze as if it were a tangible weight, but she let it pass through her without touching her. She reminded herself of the nights she had spent crying in solitude, of the mornings when the world felt impossibly heavy. Every memory of rejection, of betrayal, every cruel word had been carved into her soul. But instead of allowing it to harden her into bitterness, she had reshaped it into focus. She would no longer be moved by his theatrics. She would let them unravel themselves in her presence. Her mind worked quickly, quietly, considering the guests around her, the social dynamics, the whispers that carried more weight than the music or the glittering lights. She realized that in this room, appearances were everything, and perceptions were currency. She had been underestimated for too long, but tonight, she would redirect attention, subtly, with precision. A waiter passed by with a tray of glasses filled with sparkling champagne. Anna accepted one, letting the crystal rest lightly in her hand. She raised it with the faintest tilt of her head toward a nearby group of influential figures. People she had once envied, people who had never given her the attention she deserved. "To new encounters," she said softly, deliberately catching the eye of a few key guests. "And to the unexpected." The words, quiet but deliberate, seemed to ripple through the room. Eyes turned toward her with subtle curiosity, whispers trailing in her wake. Alexander noticed, a sharp tension rising in his chest. He realized, with a slow creeping dread, that the crowd's attention was shifting, even if only slightly. The carefully orchestrated humiliation he had planned was losing its potency. Isabella leaned closer, her voice trembling just slightly. What is she doing? She's making them look at her. Even when you're supposed to dominate." Alexander's fingers tightened around his glass, a flicker of frustration crossing his composed exterior. "She's playing a game I didn't anticipate," he murmured, almost to himself. "But she doesn't know how dangerous it is to make me notice her so carefully. She doesn't know how far I will go to control the narrative." Anna, hearing the low murmur of his voice, let a small, almost imperceptible smile curve her lips. She wasn't trying to provoke him, not yet, but she allowed herself the satisfaction of awareness. She knew the power of patience, of quiet strategy. He had displayed his pride, his triumph, and yet she remained untouched, observing, calculating, waiting for the moment when she would reclaim her own stage. Her thoughts drifted momentarily to the years after their separation. The nights of solitude, the moments of quiet despair, the effort it had taken to rebuild her identity piece by piece. She realized now that those years had forged her, honed her resilience like a blade against stone. And tonight, she would wield that blade, not with anger, but with precision and undeniable presence. The music swelled, a rich, haunting melody that underscored the tension crackling through the room. Anna's gaze swept the crowd, noting the subtle shifts, the glances cast her way, the whispered curiosity. She felt the room breathing differently, as if acknowledging the force she now carried. Alexander's smug confidence was faltering, imperceptibly at first, then more evidently, like a shadow creeping across his carefully constructed facade. She approached a small circle of influential guests who had once overlooked her. "It's remarkable," she said lightly, her voice soft but confident. "How perceptions can shift when the observer is willing to stand quietly and watch. I've discovered that some of the most powerful moments are those we create without spectacle." The group nodded subtly, eyes attentive, intrigued. Whispers spread, curiosity tinged with admiration. Anna's presence was no longer just a memory of Alexander's past. It was a force in the present, commanding attention without arrogance, without force. She had claimed a kind of quiet authority that he could not touch, no matter how hard he tried. Alexander felt a tightening in his chest, an unfamiliar tension that gnawed at his control. He could feel the subtle admiration she was drawing, the curiosity that circled like a current among the guests. She's shifting the narrative," he muttered, voice low, tinged with disbelief. "And I can't stop it." Anna caught his gaze briefly, steady and unwavering. There was no malice, no challenge. Only the quiet, unwavering strength of someone who had endured and emerged intact. And in that single glance, a silent understanding passed between them. The night was far from over, and the true battle had only just begun. She turned slightly, letting the faintest edge of a smile grace her lips, and whispered softly to herself, almost inaudible, "Patience, Alexander. Your spectacle may impress the world, but it does not impress me. Not anymore." And as the music wove its haunting patterns through the opulent ballroom, Anna Whitmore began to move through the crowd not as a victim of his cruelty, but as a quiet force of inevitability, a presence that would, in time, redefine the balance of power in the room and in their lives. This completes topic 4, deepening Anna's internal reflections and her subtle strategic moves to shift attention, while keeping the suspense and tension high. The viewer feels her intellect, resilience, and quiet dominance, while Alexander begins to sense his loss of control. She's commanding attention," Isabella murmured, a trace of unease in her tone. "And it's not just pity or curiosity. They're watching her, looking at her differently." Alexander's jaw tightened, a slow tension creeping across his face. "She shouldn't be," he said, voice low, almost strangled with frustration. "She's supposed to feel small. That's the point. That's what tonight was for." Anna, sensing the mounting focus from him, held her ground. She moved through a small cluster of guests with deliberate elegance, each smile, each subtle gesture designed to radiate composure and grace. Her heart pounded beneath the silk of her gown, a mixture of adrenaline and the sharp thrill of the challenge she now faced. Every nerve in her body was alive with anticipation. Tonight was a test of restraint, of quiet power, and she intended to pass with precision. A guest, a prominent socialite known for her sharp tongue, leaned in and whispered to Anna, her voice hushed but curious. "I have to say, it's remarkable. You're unshaken. That's rare. He planned to humiliate you, didn't he?" Anna nodded subtly, her lips curving just enough to suggest acknowledgement without weakness. "Yes," she replied softly. "He may attempt, but he will not succeed tonight. Not if I can help it." Alexander, catching the soft exchange from across the room, felt an unanticipated surge of unease. The crowd's eyes were subtly shifting, drawn toward Anna not because of his spectacle, but in spite of it. He had expected shock, embarrassment, maybe a tremor of envy, but instead, he saw control, poise, and strength radiating from her every movement. He raised his glass once more, voice carrying through the room, deliberately loud, a challenge wrapped in civility. To progress, to triumph, and to lessons learned, sometimes far too late, he said, eyes flicking toward Anna, sharp and accusatory. And to those who witness the consequences of their choices. The words hung in the air like a blade, slicing through the polite hum of conversation. Anna felt the sting, but it was no longer sharp enough to wound. Instead, it was fuel, a reminder of the fire she had tempered through years of solitude and quiet determination. She raised her chin slightly, gaze meeting his steadily. "Consequences?" she repeated softly, almost as if testing the word on her tongue, letting it linger between them. Her voice carried no malice, only calm, deliberate certainty. "Yes, consequences have a way of finding those who believe control is theirs alone." The subtle power in her tone sent a ripple through the guests. Some leaned in slightly, curiosity piqued. Others exchanged glances, sensing the tension building, the silent battle of wills unfolding before their eyes. Alexander's smirk, carefully crafted and rehearsed, faltered just enough to betray the surprise he felt. Isabella leaned in again, whispering, her words trembling with unease. She's not afraid of you. How is that possible?" Alexander's hands tightened around his glass, the muscles in his jaw working as he struggled to maintain composure. "She doesn't know fear," he said under his breath, almost a growl. "And that makes her more dangerous than I imagined." Anna, sensing the rising tide of his frustration, allowed herself a small, controlled smile. She didn't need to speak loudly. The calm power she radiated was enough to unsettle him. Every glance she offered, every subtle gesture of composure, chipped away at the illusion of control he had built for this night. The orchestra shifted, the music swelling with tension, as if responding to the unspoken conflict. Anna allowed herself to drift closer to the center of the room, subtly positioning herself where she could be noticed by more guests. Each step was precise, a measured dance between elegance and quiet assertion. She wasn't seeking revenge, not yet. She was asserting presence, claiming space in a world that had tried to minimize her. A man she had once worked with in her former life approached, recognition sparking in his eyes. "Anna," he said, voice low but full of respect, "I didn't expect to see you here tonight. You've changed. You carry yourself differently, confidently." Anna nodded, her smile faint but genuine. "It's been a long journey," she said softly, "one that taught me where true strength comes from. Tonight is a reflection of that, I suppose." Alexander watched, chest tightening, as the subtle admiration she elicited spread like wildfire among the influential guests. He had built a night to display his triumph, yet the narrative was slipping from his control. Anna's quiet strength, her composure, her subtle interactions, they were dismantling the carefully planned spectacle of humiliation he had designed. He approached her directly, moving with deliberate, controlled steps, his presence dominating the space between them. "Anna," he said, voice smooth, but with an undercurrent of tension. "You're different. I expected fear, anger, maybe even tears. But you're unshaken. How can you remain so composed?" Anna's eyes met his, steady and unwavering, and she let a small, knowing smile touch her lips. "I've learned that composure is stronger than any outburst," she said softly, her words a quiet challenge. "It speaks louder than any spectacle, any display of power. Tonight, I choose to stand, not react. And in that, I am free." The words lingered, resonating through the crowd as a subtle, electric tension filled the space. Alexander felt a shift, a crack in the fortress of control he had meticulously constructed. Every guest who had once expected a scene of humiliation now watched the silent power struggle with bated breath. Isabella's fingers tightened on his arm, anxiety creeping in. What are you going to do?" she whispered, almost afraid of the answer. Alexander took a breath, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features, and for the first time that night, he questioned whether his carefully orchestrated humiliation could succeed. The subtle dominance Anna wielded through her composure and grace had begun to reverse the narrative. She wasn't merely surviving his display. She was asserting authority, quietly, deliberately, and with a precision that left him off balance. Anna felt the pulse of the room shift around her, the hushed murmurs of curiosity, admiration, and surprise intertwining. She realized then that this confrontation was not just about the past or about his cruelty. It was about her reclaiming her presence, her dignity, and her power. The first act of public humiliation had begun to unravel, and the true story, the one she was about to write with every gesture, every word, every measured glance, was only beginning. As Alexander's eyes bore into hers, a silent, unspoken challenge passing between them, Anna whispered softly to herself, almost imperceptibly, "The night is far from over, Alexander, but the game is mine to play." This completes Topic 5, heightening the first public confrontation, intensifying suspense, and showing the shifting balance of power between Anna and Alexander. The audience feels every subtle emotional beat and anticipates what will happen next. A young executive, someone she had briefly known through professional circles, approached cautiously, as if drawn by some unspoken magnetic force. "Anna," he said, voice soft but tinged with awe, I wasn't expecting to see you tonight. You look incredible, confident, unshakable." Anna allowed herself a small, composed smile, letting the words wash over her like water over stone, smoothing the rough edges of past humiliation. "Thank you," she replied softly, voice even, carrying an undercurrent of calm power. "I've learned that confidence isn't given, it's claimed. Tonight, I'm simply reclaiming it." The young man nodded, clearly impressed, his eyes reflecting the subtle fascination that was spreading among the guests. Anna moved on, every glance and subtle interaction reinforcing the quiet shift of attention. She could feel the subtle nervous energy from Alexander, an almost imperceptible tension that vibrated beneath his polished exterior. Alexander noticed the subtle nods, the curious gazes of the crowd shifting toward Anna. His jaw tightened. She's manipulating them without a word," he muttered under his breath, his voice a mixture of frustration and disbelief. "How is it possible to command the room without speaking loudly?" Isabella, sensing his growing agitation, whispered, She's controlling the room with her composure. It's unsettling. Are you worried?" He ignored her, eyes locked on Anna, watching every movement, every interaction. "It's not worry," he said, voice low, taut with tension. "It's recognition. She's stronger than I gave her credit for, and that unsettles me." Anna, walking past a table of influential guests, smiled politely at a few nods and greetings. Each gesture, each acknowledgement, subtly tilted the room's attention toward her. She did not flaunt wealth or arrogance. Her power was quiet, refined, undeniable in its subtlety. And with every interaction, she felt the energy in the room subtly shifting, the atmosphere changing from curiosity about a past scandal to fascination with the woman standing before them. Her gaze fell on Alexander across the room, the tension between them thickening. He attempted to maintain his composed exterior, but the cracks were visible now, slight, almost imperceptible, yet there. She could sense the frustration rising, the silent realization that his carefully constructed control of the evening was slipping through his fingers. "You're different," he said finally, stepping closer, his voice controlled but tinged with incredulity. "I expected fear, hesitation, perhaps anger, but this composure, it unnerves me." Anna met his gaze steadily, unflinching. "It shouldn't surprise you," she replied softly, letting her words linger in the charged air. "Composure isn't born overnight. It's forged through trials, through betrayal, through every attempt to diminish you. I am the sum of all I've endured, Alexander. And tonight, I choose to stand unshaken." His chest tightened at her words, a flutter of unease passing through him. Isabella, noticing the shift, leaned in again, voice urgent. "Alexander, she's turning the room against us. The attention, everyone's watching her, not you. This isn't how it's supposed to happen." Alexander's hand clenched around his glass. "Control is an illusion," he murmured under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. "And she's dismantling it with elegance, calm elegance." Anna felt the faint tremor beneath his composure and allowed herself the tiniest flicker of satisfaction. Not triumph, yet but recognition of the subtle, undeniable victory she was carving out with every gesture, every carefully placed word. She moved closer to a circle of influential figures who had previously disregarded her presence, engaging them in light conversation, her tone measured, her smiles genuine yet purposeful. "You have a remarkable perspective," one of them said softly, clearly captivated by her poise. "It's rare to meet someone so composed, so deliberate. You command attention without even trying." Anna tilted her head slightly, letting a shadow of a smile curve her lips. "Sometimes it's not about trying," she said softly. "It's about knowing who you are and letting the world adjust to that reality." Alexander's gaze followed her every word, the tension in his shoulders tightening further. He had constructed a narrative, an evening to showcase his victory, to humiliate her in public, and yet here she was, silently undermining every plan he had meticulously laid. The room's energy was no longer his to control. It was shifting subtly toward her, drawn by the quiet gravity she exuded. Isabella leaned even closer, her voice trembling. This isn't just about pride, is it? She's controlling the room, influencing them, and you can't stop it." Alexander's eyes narrowed, a flash of frustration and incredulity crossing his features. "No," he admitted, voice tight. "I can't. And that scares me more than anything else tonight." Anna, sensing the delicate balance of power, moved subtly toward the center of the room, her presence commanding attention not through spectacle, but through undeniable poise and quiet authority. The crowd responded instinctively. Their whispers of curiosity, once laced with judgment, were now tinged with admiration. She allowed herself a soft exhale, her chest rising with the calm thrill of the game she was beginning to master. She had entered the room anticipating humiliation, prepared for the sting of public spectacle. But instead, she found herself in control. Not through arrogance, not through loud displays, but through presence, composure, and the quiet art of observation and subtle influence. Alexander watched, tension radiating from him like heat from a fire, as Anna's influence over the room became undeniable. Every polite nod, every faint smile exchanged with the guests subtly undermined the narrative he had so carefully constructed. The humiliation he had planned was dissolving into admiration. Slow, quiet, and unmistakably hers. She glanced briefly at him, meeting his gaze with unyielding calm. "This night," she whispered under her breath, barely audible, "was meant to break me, but it will not. Not me, not now, not ever." And in that charged, suspended moment, the room itself seemed to acknowledge the shift. Alexander's carefully curated control faltered. Isabella's tension grew, and Anna, with quiet precision, began to step fully into the power that had been denied her for so long, slowly, deliberately, and with a grace that left no doubt. The story of the evening was no longer his to dictate. He stepped toward her deliberately, a mixture of pride and irritation sharpening his movements. "Anna," he said, voice smooth but edged with frustration. "You've made quite an impression tonight, but don't think that your composure, your subtle charm, can undo everything I've built." Anna turned slowly, meeting his gaze with unwavering eyes. There was no tremor in her voice, no hint of fear, only the quiet force of someone who had survived storms far harsher than this. "Undo what?" she asked softly, the words almost casual, yet charged with intent. "The spectacle you planned? The moment you thought would humiliate me?" Her lips curved faintly, a ghost of a smile. "I think you underestimate what I've endured and what I can withstand." A ripple of tension traveled through the surrounding guests. They sensed the unspoken history, the intensity of emotions that hung between them like a live wire. Some shifted in their seats, glancing toward the two of them with barely concealed curiosity. Others leaned forward, ears straining for every inflection, every subtle gesture. Alexander's hands tightened around his champagne glass, knuckles whitening. You think standing here, smiling, nodding politely, somehow restores you?" His voice rose, controlled yet laced with anger. "Do you think this calm, this elegance changes the past? Changes what you lost? Changes what I've I've made clear to the world. Anna's chest rose and fell evenly, her heart pounding beneath the silk of her gown, but she did not flinch. No, she said softly, deliberately. It doesn't change the past, but it changes the present, and the present is mine to claim. I will not shrink to fit your narrative of victory. Alexander's eyes darkened, the first hints of panic flickering in their depths. And yet, he said, voice lowering into a dangerous whisper, you are here in my world, standing in front of my guests, in the house I built, in the space I controlled. How dare you? Anna stepped slightly closer, the motion slow, deliberate, like a predator encroaching into territory previously dominated by another. I dare because I survived your absence, Alexander, she said quietly, her voice steady, unwavering. I dared because I rebuilt myself without your approval, without your attention, and without your presence defining my worth. I dared because I am no longer afraid of you, or of what you think the world should see of me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few women whispered to one another, eyes wide. Did you hear that? One murmured. She's telling him off calmly. Alexander's face flushed, a mix of rage and disbelief crossing his features. He had anticipated tears, shock, maybe even a stammering plea for recognition. But not this. Not composure. Not clarity. Not the quiet assertion of power that stripped him of his control in front of the very audience he had sought to impress. You think you're untouchable, he said finally, voice low, sharp as a blade. Because you survived my betrayal, my decisions, my everything. But this, he gestured subtly around the room, encompassing the opulent space, the gathering of eyes. This is still my world, and I am in my world too, Anna interrupted gently, cutting through the tension with a poised precision that made even the most influential guests hold their breath. Tonight, I am not here to compete with you. I am here to exist as the woman I became while you were busy trying to orchestrate your triumphs. And in that, I am undeniable, unshakable, and unafraid. The words hung in the air like an electric charge. The guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the subtle but undeniable shift in power. Whispers spread quietly, almost conspiratorially. Some leaned in, trying to catch every nuance of their exchange. Some smiled faintly, sensing the drama unfold with every silent heartbeat. Isabella, standing close to Alexander, pressed a hand to his arm. This isn't supposed to happen. You've lost control, Alexander. She's bending the room to her will without a single harsh word. Alexander's jaw tightened, and he looked at her sharply. She's dangerous, he muttered almost to himself. And I didn't see it coming. Calmness, composure, it's worse than tears, worse than anger. It undermines everything. Anna, feeling the subtle tremor of his control, allowed herself a fleeting sense of satisfaction. But she did not let it linger. There was no victory yet, only the strategic positioning of the first move in a longer, more intricate game. Every nod, every whispered word from the guests, every glance in her direction was a small victory, a subtle shift of influence. She stepped slightly closer, so close now that Alexander could feel her presence fully, and whispered, almost inaudibly, but with a deliberate edge, "Tonight, Alexander, you planned to humiliate me, but instead you revealed something about yourself. You revealed that control is fragile, and that your power depends on others believing in your dominance. And now, I think it's time the world sees who I truly am, not who you imagined I was." A hush fell over the room. Guests exchanged glances, uncertain whether to intervene, to watch, or to admire. The air was taut, almost unbearable in its intensity, as Alexander's face hardened, and Anna's calm defiance radiated like a quiet storm, pulling attention, curiosity, and unspoken respect toward her. Alexander's voice trembled slightly, the first real crack in his composure. You think you can just stand here and command the room?" Anna tilted her head slightly, a soft, knowing smile touching her lips. I don't think, Alexander. I am. And perhaps one day, you'll realize that true power isn't in spectacle or in humiliation. It's in survival, in resilience, in quiet dominance no one dares to challenge. The tension between them was palpable, every heartbeat measured, every breath deliberate. The orchestra swelled, echoing the unspoken drama that electrified the air. Alexander's hands trembled slightly around his glass, and for the first time tonight, he felt the fragile weight of doubt pressing against him. Anna had turned the evening inside out, not with anger, not with spectacle, but with presence, poise, and a quiet, unshakable power. And as the crowd watched, holding their breath, the first overt confrontation had not ended in humiliation. It had shifted the narrative entirely. Anna Whitmore, the woman he had tried to diminish, had become the unseen force, the undeniable presence that commanded attention, admiration, and subtle awe. In that moment, Alexander realized something he had never anticipated. The battle he thought he controlled had already begun to slip through his fingers, and Anna, calm yet potent, aware yet unshaken, had only just begun. This completes Topic 7, delivering a high-stakes, emotionally charged confrontation, intensifying suspense, and highlighting the shift in power dynamics. The audience experiences every heartbeat, every subtle emotional nuance, and anticipates the dramatic escalation that follows. A man in an elegant suit, one of the key figures in the city's business circles, approached her cautiously, a polite smile masking obvious curiosity. Anna, I must say, I've never witnessed such composure under pressure. The way you handled everything earlier, it's remarkable. Anna allowed a small, composed smile to touch her lips. Thank you, she said softly, her voice calm yet carrying an undercurrent of authority. I've learned that moments of pressure reveal who we truly are, and sometimes we have to claim the space we deserve, even if others try to make us invisible. The man nodded slowly, clearly impressed. Indeed, most would crumble under such scrutiny. Most would. They would. Anna interrupted gently, not harshly, but with quiet precision. But most are not forced to rise from the ashes of betrayal. They've never been tested in the way some of us are. Her gaze flicked subtly toward Alexander, who was standing across the room, observing her with a growing tension that bordered on panic. Alexander's fingers curled tightly around his glass, knuckles pale. He had anticipated admiration directed at him tonight, validation of his power, but instead, the attention had shifted, subtly yet unmistakably, toward Anna. Each glance, each whisper of recognition she received was a reminder that the carefully constructed narrative he had built was slipping through his fingers. Isabella leaned in, her voice low and anxious. This isn't how it's supposed to go, Alexander. The attention, everyone is drawn to her, not you. And she's not even trying. She's controlling the room effortlessly. He shook his head, frustration evident, voice tight. It's not control, he muttered. It's influence. She's bending their perception without them even realizing it. Calmness, confidence. It's insidious. It undermines everything I've done. Anna, sensing the shift, moved closer to a small group of influential guests who had previously treated her with polite indifference. She greeted each one with subtle warmth, listening intently, responding thoughtfully. Every interaction, every nod, every measured laugh drew them closer, not through spectacle, but through the undeniable force of her presence. A woman, a socialite who had once dismissed Anna as inconsequential, leaned in, voice hushed. I must admit, I never expected this. You're remarkable. There's a quiet strength about you that's impossible to ignore. Anna's eyes met hers, steady and calm. Strength, she said softly, is not about dominance or displays. It's about surviving, enduring, and standing firm when others try to diminish you. Tonight, I stand not to prove anything to him, but to prove it to myself and to those who understand the weight of resilience. The woman nodded, visibly moved, and Anna felt the subtle shift in energy solidify. The guests around her were leaning in, drawn not by gossip, not by scandal, but by the quiet power of her authenticity. Alexander's planned humiliation had failed. She had turned it into a display of undeniable authority. He stepped forward, attempting to reassert dominance, his movements deliberate, his voice smooth yet edged with tension. "Anna," he said, locking eyes with her, "I don't understand how you do this, how you command attention, respect, influence without raising your voice, without theatrics." Anna's lips curved slightly, a ghost of a smile, as if she had anticipated his question all along. "Because true influence," she said softly, deliberately, "doesn't need to scream. It's not measured by how loudly one declares superiority, but by the subtle, undeniable force of presence. You built your empire on spectacle. I am building mine on resilience. And resilience endures." The crowd sensed the weight of her words. Whispers spread quietly, admiration threaded with awe. Some guests exchanged glances, realizing the power dynamic had shifted. Alexander's chest tightened. He could feel it, the unspoken recognition that his control over the evening was waning. Isabella, sensing the falter, murmured nervously, "Alexander, she's not afraid of you. And the more you try to assert control, the more the room aligns with her." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and disbelief crossing his features. This isn't supposed to happen. I orchestrated everything tonight. I controlled the narrative. And yet, she's reshaping it effortlessly. Anna moved closer to a corner where a few influential figures were gathered, speaking softly, her words deliberate, thoughtful. "The world," she said gently, "often tries to define us by the failures, the betrayals, the moments when others thought we would break. But we define ourselves not by what they plan for us, but by how we rise after. That is strength. That is presence. That is influence." The words hung in the air, resonating through the room. Guests leaned forward, captivated. The energy had shifted so subtly, so completely, that even Alexander could feel it like a physical weight pressing against him. He moved closer, voice low, taut with frustration. You're turning my own rules against me," he said, almost a whisper, yet audible enough for Anna to hear. "Your composure, your strength, it's destabilizing everything I planned." Anna met his gaze evenly, unflinching. "Not destabilizing, Alexander," she said softly, voice calm but carrying undeniable authority. "Transforming. And perhaps one day you'll understand that true power isn't in humiliation or spectacle. It's in surviving and claiming the respect and presence that others try to deny you. Tonight, I claim mine." Alexander's eyes flicked across the room, catching glimpses of the subtle nods, the quiet admiration that trailed Anna wherever she moved. He realized, with a creeping sense of unease, that his carefully orchestrated dominance was dissolving. The crowd's attention, once his to command, now gravitated toward her, drawn not by scandal, not by spectacle, but by the undeniable presence of someone who had survived betrayal and emerged unbroken. Anna allowed herself the faintest, almost imperceptible smile. Not triumph, not yet, but satisfaction in the knowledge that the tide was turning. She had entered the room anticipating humiliation. Instead, she had claimed control, quietly, strategically, with elegance and presence. And as Alexander's gaze met hers, tension coiling in his chest, Anna whispered softly to herself, almost inaudibly, "The night is mine, and I am only beginning." This completes Topic 8, with Anna consolidating her influence, the crowd subtly aligning with her, and Alexander's control slipping further. Suspense and emotional intensity remain high. Preparing for dramatic escalation in the following, he swallowed hard, fingers tightening around the stem of his champagne glass until the crystal threatened to slip. Isabella leaned close, her voice trembling with unease. "Alexander, she's bending the entire room to her will. And the more you try to assert control, the more she strengthens it. You need to act now." He shook his head, a flush of frustration coloring his features. "No," he muttered, voice low, taut with tension. Not act, strike carefully. If I overreach, I give her more. I must destabilize her subtly without breaking my facade. She thrives on calm. I cannot let her see desperation, but I must counter her influence. Across the room, Anna could sense the shift. She felt the subtle tremor in his stance, the tightening of his jaw, the flicker of frustration beneath the polished exterior. He was searching for a way to reclaim dominance, to control the narrative he had so meticulously designed. Yet she remained poised, every gesture measured, every smile deliberate. She had weathered storms that were far more violent than this, and she knew his attempts to regain control would reveal more about him than they ever could about her. He approached her again, deliberately closing the distance, voice smooth but laced with tension. "Anna," he said, eyes locking onto hers. "I don't understand. How can you command this room so effortlessly? You stand here, smiling, interacting, and yet the attention is all on you. How is it possible to be so untouchable?" Anna met his gaze evenly, letting the silence stretch, filling the space with the weight of unspoken history and quiet authority. "Untouchable?" she repeated softly, voice calm but deliberate. "No one is untouchable, Alexander. I am resilient. I am present. I am aware. And the difference between you and me is that I survive what others use to diminish me. You sought to humiliate me tonight. You sought spectacle. I choose presence. And presence cannot be shaken by theatrics." A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd, subtle but unmistakable. The guests leaned slightly, sensing the silent clash of wills, captivated by the tension that radiated between them. Alexander's chest tightened. He had planned a night to assert dominance, to publicly humiliate her. Yet the scene unfolding was far from his control. You survived me?" he said finally, voice tight, almost strangled with incredulity. "After everything I did, after the choices I made, you're still standing? Stronger than before." Anna allowed herself a small, controlled smile, the faintest curve of her lips a quiet, almost imperceptible victory. "I survived because I had no other choice," she said softly, letting the words linger. "I survived because I had to reclaim my life, my dignity, and my presence. You were never the measure of my strength, Alexander. You were only the shadow I had to pass through to become who I am." His eyes darkened, a flicker of desperation crossing his features. "And now the room sees it," he whispered almost to himself. "They see admiration, respect, even envy, and I cannot undo it." Anna tilted her head slightly, letting the soft edge of a smile grace her lips. "You cannot undo what is earned through resilience," she replied quietly. "You can only observe it, and perhaps learn what true strength looks like." He stepped even closer, voice dropping to a dangerous, low murmur that carried only for her ears. You think you've won this?" His chest rose and fell rapidly, tension radiating from every movement. "Do you understand how fragile your influence is? How easily it can be shattered?" Anna's gaze held his unwaveringly. She could feel the tremor in his control, the first hints of fear threading through his polished exterior. "Influence built on spectacle is fragile, Alexander," she said softly, measured. "Influence built on resilience endures. And tonight, I am enduring. You will see it, even if you cannot understand it yet." The crowd, sensing the charged exchange, leaned in subtly, the room holding its breath. Whispers traveled quietly, speculation mingling with fascination. Guests who had once been indifferent now watched with attention, drawn to Anna's quiet power, her calm assertion of presence. Alexander's meticulously orchestrated plan of humiliation was unraveling before him, each whispered acknowledgement of her composure a silent strike against his pride. Isabella's voice trembled at his side. "Alexander, you're losing them. The room is no longer yours. She's taken control without a single display. You can't fight this with anger." Alexander's hands shook slightly, the glass almost slipping from his grip. I must," he said through clenched teeth. I cannot let her dominate the narrative. Not now. Not here. Anna, sensing the mounting tension, allowed herself the faintest flicker of satisfaction. She had anticipated his attempts to regain control, and each one revealed his instability, his reliance on spectacle and intimidation. He was unraveling quietly, exposing the fragility of his dominance, while she remained poised, resilient, and fully aware of the subtle shifts in the room. A subtle, almost conspiratorial hush spread among the guests. Their curiosity had evolved into fascination. Their whispered admiration for Anna became tangible. Alexander's attempts to command attention were failing, and he could feel it. The pull of the room toward her, a quiet gravity that no display, no accusation, no show of dominance could counter. Anna stepped closer, her voice dropping to a soft, deliberate whisper, almost inaudible to everyone but him. Tonight, Alexander, you planned to break me, but all you revealed was yourself. Your reliance on spectacle, on control, on intimidation. And now, everyone sees it. Even you cannot hide the cracks. Alexander's breath caught. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words faltered, unspoken, as he felt the weight of truth pressing against him. Anna's presence, calm, composed, and unshakable, had not only survived his attempts at dominance, it had subtly overturned them. And in that moment, as the room absorbed the tension between them, the first overt manifestation of Alexander's desperation and Anna's unwavering strength, it became clear the night's narrative had shifted irreversibly. The stage he thought he controlled was now hers in subtle, undeniable ways, and the real battle, the one of resilience, presence, and quiet authority, had only just begun. He took a deliberate step closer, the polished veneer of charm slipping into tension. Anna, he said, voice low, firm, yet carrying an undertone of desperation. I've built everything with precision. Power, influence, respect. All of it meticulously crafted. And now you're turning it all into chaos. Anna's eyes met his evenly, unshaken. Chaos? She repeated softly, voice calm but sharp, like a finely tuned instrument. This isn't chaos, Alexander. This is reality. Your attempts to manipulate, to dominate, to humiliate, they are fragile. They crumble under resilience. And resilience is what I embody. A hush passed through the crowd. Even those standing at the edges felt the tension, the subtle electricity that crackled in the air. The room had shifted. The energy no longer centered on Alexander's spectacle, but on the quiet, undeniable force of Anna's presence. Alexander's chest tightened, and he took a deep breath, attempting to regain composure. You think your calm, your poise, makes you untouchable, he said, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. But the world doesn't reward the quiet. It rewards the bold, the visible, the spectacular. And yet, everyone is watching you. Anna tilted her head slightly, allowing a faint, controlled smile to touch her lips. Yes, they are watching, she said softly, measured. And they're seeing someone who refuses to shrink to the expectations of others. Someone who has endured betrayal, loss, and humiliation, and stands here, whole, unshaken. They see strength, Alexander, and strength is far more compelling than spectacle. The shift in the crowd's energy became undeniable. Whispers spread quietly, admiration threaded with awe. A few influential guests exchanged glances, sensing the drama and power play unfolding before them. Alexander's carefully constructed narrative of control, of dominance, was slipping like sand through his fingers. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more, his words barely above a murmur, yet charged with intensity. You survived what I thought would break you. But do you understand? Do you realize what this means? That your presence, your calm, it challenges me, publicly, in front of everyone I've tried to impress. Anna's gaze did not waver. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, closing the distance between them by only a fraction, enough to intensify the tension. I understand perfectly, she said softly. It means that the power you wield through fear, through spectacle is temporary, fragile. It means that true strength lies in endurance, in composure, in reclaiming what was taken without ever letting the world define your worth. I am here, Alexander, not to challenge you, but to exist. And existing, unbroken, speaks louder than any display you could orchestrate. Alexander's jaw tightened, his hands trembling slightly as he struggled to maintain a veneer of control. He had anticipated this confrontation would end in humiliation for her, not the subtle, undeniable assertion of dominance she was projecting. You make it impossible for me to dictate the narrative, he said finally, voice tight, sharp with frustration. I can't undo what they see. Anna's lips curved ever so slightly, a flicker of triumph hidden beneath her calm. She leaned forward subtly, her voice dropping, intimate, but still audible enough for him alone. No, Alexander, you cannot undo it, because it's not yours to control. It never was. Influence built on fear, on spectacle, on orchestrated humiliation. It collapses under presence. And I am present, completely, utterly, unshakably. The room seemed to vibrate with tension. Guests leaned in, some whispering in awe, others exchanging knowing glances. The orchestra's soft melody continued, almost unaware of the storm of emotion weaving through the space. Every word Anna spoke, every measured step she took, tightened the invisible knot of suspense between them. Alexander's eyes flicked across the room, catching glimpses of subtle nods, faint smiles, and hushed admiration directed at Anna. He could feel the gravitational pull shifting. The crowd, once his audience, now watched her. He realized, with a creeping dread, that his control over the evening, and perhaps over perception itself, was slipping irreversibly. Do you even realize what you're doing? He whispered finally, almost strangled with tension. You're dismantling years of strategy, years of careful positioning. All of it effortlessly, calmly, without raising your voice, without spectacle. You're dangerous. Anna held his gaze unwaveringly, the quiet strength radiating from her in waves that seemed to press against him physically. Yes, she said softly, deliberate, measured. I am dangerous to the narrative you tried to write for me. Dangerous because I survived it, and dangerous because I refuse to be defined by your choices or your attempts to control my presence. I am here, whole, unbroken, and nothing you orchestrate tonight will change that. A silence fell over the room, heavy and palpable, as the crowd absorbed the exchange. The shift in power was undeniable. The energy, once directed toward Alexander, now gravitated toward Anna. Every subtle gesture, every soft word of hers had not only survived his attacks but inverted the narrative entirely. Alexander felt the weight of it pressing against him, a sharp, bitter realization. He could no longer dominate the room, control perception, or orchestrate humiliation. The crowd's gaze, their silent judgment, their quiet admiration. It was no longer his to command. Anna had claimed the stage through presence, resilience, and quiet authority. Anna took a deliberate step back, allowing the tension to linger, letting the room absorb the full scope of the shift. Her voice dropped to a soft murmur, almost a whisper only he could hear, but sharp with clarity. Tonight was meant to break me, Alexander. Instead, it revealed you, and in revealing you, it revealed me. I am here and I will remain, and that is far more powerful than any spectacle you could create. Alexander's breath caught. He opened his mouth, searching for words, for a retort, but found only silence. The crowd sensed it too. The battle he thought he controlled was slipping, the tension unresolved, the power balance shifting in ways no one had anticipated. Anna's calm, unshakable presence had turned humiliation into revelation, vulnerability into authority, and the stage itself had become hers. And in that charged, electric moment, the first real fracture of Alexander's control was complete. The night had changed irrevocably. The subtle drama that had begun with whispers of past betrayal had escalated into a public, silent war of presence, and the room, and the audience could feel every heartbeat, every breath, every unspoken emotion. Isabella leaned closer, her voice trembling. "Alexander, you can't fight her with control. She doesn't respond to spectacle, to intimidation. She reads the room, shapes it, and commands attention effortlessly. You need to think strategically, carefully." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and disbelief twisting his features. I know that," he muttered, voice tight. "But every attempt I make to regain control, to assert dominance, it backfires. She is infuriatingly composed, and that drives me to the edge." Across the room, Anna noticed the subtle tremor in his stance, the tightening of his jaw, the almost imperceptible flare of his nostrils. He was approaching a breaking point, a place where desperation could override decorum, where carefully measured appearances could crack. She did not flinch. Instead, she allowed herself to observe, to read, to anticipate. He stepped closer, closing the space between them more aggressively this time, voice low but edged with desperation. "Anna," he said, eyes dark, intent piercing hers. "You don't understand. The influence you wield, the attention you command, it's dangerous. Dangerous because you make people believe you are untouchable, unshakable. But no one is untouchable. No one survives everything and remains unbroken." Anna's eyes met his evenly, unwavering. The room seemed to contract around the tension between them, the guests sensing the charged energy but unsure whether to intervene, watch, or hold their breath. "Untouchable?" she repeated softly, voice calm but deliberate. "No one is untouchable, Alexander. But I am unbroken. And being unbroken is not the same as being untouchable. It is far more powerful, because it cannot be undone by spectacle, by humiliation, or by the attempts of someone who confuses dominance with control." He flinched slightly, as though struck by the weight of her words. You speak as if you've mastered everything," he said, voice tight, sharp. "As if every betrayal, every insult, every humiliation only served to make you stronger. But strength can falter. And tonight, if I strike, if I assert my power decisively, I can strike." Anna interrupted, calm but firm, her voice cutting through the rising tension. "Do you truly believe aggression, intimidation, or a show of dominance can erase what has already happened? Can it change who I am? You've already revealed the truth tonight, Alexander. Control built on fear is fragile, and power dependent on humiliation is temporary. I do not fear your strikes. I do not bend to them, and that will always frustrate you." A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the crowd. The guests sensed the intensity, the invisible clash of wills, the subtle battle that extended beyond words. Alexander's face tightened, frustration sharpening into something more dangerous: desperation. He took a sharp breath, lowering his voice almost to a growl. You are infuriating. The way you command presence, without spectacle, without fury, it undermines me, and I cannot allow it to continue." Anna remained perfectly still, the faintest smile tracing her lips, composed, unshakable. "Alexander, you are learning tonight that influence, true influence, is not built on fear or theatrical displays. It is earned through presence, through resilience, through enduring what others expect will break you, and emerging stronger, calmer, and undeniable. You cannot undo that, not with anger, not with intimidation, not with spectacle." His chest heaved, a flush of heat crossing his face. He had expected tears, shock, hesitation, but not this. Not calm authority, not the subtle, unshakable assertion of power she was demonstrating. And the crowd, they were watching, their energy aligned with her presence. Every glance she received, every whispered acknowledgement, reinforced the subtle shift of dominance. He stepped even closer, almost pressing toward her, voice low and dangerous. "And yet, I can feel it. The room, everyone sees it. They watch you, they admire you, they They respect resilience. Anna interrupted softly, voice gentle but firm. They are drawn to authenticity, to composure under pressure, to someone who has survived betrayal and humiliation without losing themselves. That is what they see, Alexander. Not just me, but the truth you cannot control. That power built on fear is fleeting, and influence built on strength endures. Alexander's hands clenched involuntarily at his sides, jaw tightening. You make me feel powerless, he admitted, almost a whisper, though the words carried the weight of revelation. I thought tonight would be my victory. Thought I could humiliate you, and instead, I watch as you bend the room, subtly, quietly, and I cannot stop it. Anna tilted her head slightly, maintaining her calm. Good, she said softly. Recognize it, accept it, and perhaps learn that true strength is not in orchestrating humiliation, but in enduring life's storms with grace, presence, and quiet authority. You cannot break me, Alexander, but you can begin to understand what it means to stand unshaken. A faint, almost imperceptible smile curved Anna's lips, and the subtle shift in energy solidified. The crowd, sensing the complete reversal of tension, leaned forward in fascination, absorbing the quiet but undeniable demonstration of power. Alexander's attempts at overt control had failed. His desperation only highlighted her composure, her quiet dominance. Isabella leaned toward him, voice trembling. Alexander, the room, it's hers now, subtly, completely. Every glance, every whisper, every attention, they follow her. You can feel it, can't you? He swallowed hard, face pale beneath the sheen of perspiration. I feel it, he admitted softly, and it terrifies me. Anna, sensing the first real fracture of his composure, took a slow, deliberate step back, letting the tension hang like a charged wire in the room. Her voice dropped, intimate, deliberate, yet audible. Tonight was meant to break me. Instead, it revealed you. Your reliance on control, on spectacle, on orchestrated intimidation is fragile. And I am unbroken. That is far more powerful than any display you could create. The silence was deafening. The room held its breath, captivated by the subtle yet seismic shift. Alexander's chest rose and fell rapidly, the first cracks of desperation and self-awareness forming, while Anna's presence radiated calm, undeniable strength. Every heartbeat in the room seemed to echo the tension, the suspense, the drama unfolding silently before them. In that charged, electric moment, the balance had irrevocably shifted. Alexander's desperation had escalated, yet his attempts to regain control only revealed the depth of Anna's influence, resilience, and power. The audience, both present and now emotionally invested, felt every nuance, every pulse, every subtle shift of dominance. And Anna stood poised, unwavering, fully aware that the night's narrative was no longer his to dictate, and that the next move he made would either reveal him further or give her the ultimate insight into the man who had once thought he could define her world. He stepped forward again, each movement deliberate, determined to regain some semblance of control. Anna, he said, voice low, dangerous, carrying an edge that sent a ripple of tension through the room. You don't understand. This isn't just about presence. It's about respect, about power, about control. And I will not allow the room to turn against me, not tonight. Anna's gaze met his, steady, unflinching. Alexander, she said softly, measured. The room isn't turning against you. It's merely recognizing something you refuse to acknowledge. That influence built on fear is fragile, and respect gained through endurance is lasting. You may think you control the narrative, but tonight, you've already lost it. A flicker of desperation crossed his face, but he masked it with a controlled, almost predatory expression. He lowered his voice further, so intimate it felt like a whispered challenge meant only for her. You think calmness can triumph over spectacle? That resilience can outweigh manipulation? I will show you otherwise. Anna's lips curved ever so slightly, the faintest shadow of a smile tracing her calm expression. Show me, she replied softly, voice steady. But remember, power derived from intimidation crumbles under presence. Every attempt to dominate me only reveals the fragility of your control. He leaned in subtly, lowering his tone further, drawing on the calculated force of his authority. You underestimate the stakes, he said, a tension in his jaw betraying the controlled aggression in his words. I could expose you, undermine you in front of them all. I could dismantle everything you've built tonight in a single moment. Anna's eyes narrowed, unshaken. Expose me? Alexander, everything you could say has already been said. Everything you could do has already failed. What remains is truth and presence. You can threaten, you can manipulate, you can attempt spectacle, but you cannot undo resilience. You cannot undo calm, and you cannot undo what I am. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, his breath catching as he struggled to maintain his composure. The crowd, sensing the tension, held their collective breath. Whispers traveled quietly through the edges of the room, each subtle acknowledgement of the silent war of wills. The energy had shifted so subtly, so completely, that even those not directly involved felt the gravity of the moment. You think you've won? Alexander muttered finally, his voice rough with the first cracks of desperation. But every move you make, every glance, every smile, it's all calculated. You're not just unbroken. You're strategizing, manipulating, bending this room to your will. Anna's lips curved ever so slightly, her calm unshaken. Perhaps, she said softly, almost a whisper, but I bend nothing. I survive, Alexander. I endure. I command attention not through force, not through threat, but through presence. Every choice I've made tonight is to remain unshaken, to claim the space that is mine by right of resilience. That is all, and that is enough. His jaw tightened, knuckles whitening as he gripped the stem of his glass, frustration and disbelief radiating from him. Enough? He repeated, incredulous. Enough to undo everything I've worked for? Enough to make everyone see? See me as powerless? Anna's voice dropped, intimate yet deliberate, piercing the tension between them. Powerless is not the word, Alexander. Fragile, perhaps, dependent on spectacle, dependent on intimidation. That is what tonight reveals. And you cannot change it with threats, with anger, or with displays. Only the past you've created can speak, and it has already spoken. The crowd felt it, the undeniable shift, the moment when the tension crystallized into a revelation. Alexander's desperation became palpable, the first cracks of his composure showing under the weight of unspoken acknowledgement. Anna's calm, measured presence radiated, not aggressively, but with subtle, undeniable authority that no spectacle could counter. He took a step back, voice dropping almost to a whisper, raw and tinged with frustration. You frustrate me beyond measure. The way you remain calm, composed, unshaken. It undermines everything I am, everything I've built, and yet cannot break it, cannot touch it. I cannot control it. Anna held his gaze, her calm, unwavering, voice deliberate, carrying quiet conviction. And that, Alexander, is the truth you must accept. Tonight, you see that influence derived from intimidation is fragile, and presence rooted in endurance is lasting. You cannot undo it. You cannot diminish it. You can only witness it. The room was silent, the orchestra's soft melody contrasting the tension that crackled like electricity. Guests leaned in, captivated, sensing the subtle yet seismic power play. Alexander's carefully orchestrated display of dominance had faltered. Anna's quiet, deliberate assertion of resilience had inverted the narrative entirely. He opened his mouth, searching for words, for a retort, but found only silence. The realization hit him with a force he could not deflect. The crowd's attention, admiration, and subtle allegiance now followed her, and no act of spectacle or intimidation could reclaim it. Anna allowed herself a faint, almost imperceptible smile, a subtle acknowledgement of the quiet victory she had claimed. She had endured, she had survived, and in doing so, She had revealed the fragility of his dominance to the very audience he had sought to command. Alexander's breath came in sharp, measured pulls. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, the first cracks of desperation, the unspoken acknowledgement of her presence, the undeniable power of calm and resilience. He had attempted a bold maneuver to regain control, but it had only solidified the narrative she now commanded. And Anna remained poised, aware, unshaken. Every whisper of admiration, every subtle nod of acknowledgement from the crowd reinforced the truth. The knight's narrative, once his to command, had shifted irrevocably. The room, now fully engaged, felt the suspense, the tension, the drama. Every guest sensed the collision of wills, the clash of resilience against desperation, the subtle yet undeniable assertion of power that no display could diminish. He felt a cold spike of panic in his chest, a realization settling like ice. The carefully constructed narrative he had controlled for years was unraveling before him. He could feel the eyes on him shifting, not with the deference he had demanded, but with a curiosity, a fascination, and, most terrifying of all, a subtle judgment. He forced a tight-lipped smile, stepping closer to Anna once more, attempting to reclaim even a fragment of dominance. "Anna," he said, voice low, controlled but trembling beneath the surface. "Do you even see what's happening? The room, they're captivated by you, by your presence, and you let it happen without resistance. How is this possible?" Anna's gaze held his without flinching. Her voice was calm, steady, each word,